I'm going to share my screen for that quick introduction. So again, hi everyone. Welcome to our first conservation education workshop of 2025. My name is Bernardo Traversari, and I am the Director of Operations and Programs for SCBNA. Before we dive into today's workshop, I wanted to briefly introduce what SCBNA is, otherwise known as the Society for Conservation Biology in North America, what our education committee does, who is a part of it, and how it all relates back to today's workshop. So SCBNA is the North American region of the Society for Conservation Biology, which is an international professional society made up mostly of conservation scientists, but also anyone really that's involved in conservation and conserving our Earth's biodiversity. The mission of SCBNA specifically is to connect diverse students and professionals to advance and apply conservation knowledge, and also to create an inclusive community of conservation professionals and to empower all voices that are involved in this very important work. We offer a lot of different services and professional development opportunities for members. This is also shared across all of our other regions, and these opportunities are also offered by our SCB Global Services Office, but just a few of those have been highlighted here on the right. I did already mention professional development opportunities like this one, but we also offer professional development opportunities for conservation policy, for student affairs, for chapters. We have 32 chapters across North America, and then other areas as well. We also have research and publications that are available for folks to use by becoming members of the society. And we also hold biannual conferences, both regional in nature. The next one for us, our North American Congress for Conservation Biology, will take place in 2026. But there's also international conferences that are held by our Global Services Office. And the next one for those is taking place this summer in Australia. So those are some of the ways that we allow our members to interact with one another, to network with one another, and some of the services that we provide. If you want to become a member, which I strongly encourage you to do, you can quickly take a picture of this QR code with your phone. Otherwise, if you go to our website, you should be easily able to find our Join Us button, and then you can go through the process of becoming a member, not only of our region, but also of the Global Society, if you want to. I will note that we also launched a new membership tier this past year, which is our associate membership, and that is completely free for anyone who wants to join. So again, I highly encourage everyone who's here today to become a member and to take advantage of the benefits that are provided to members. Now, specific to the Education Committee, this is one of our organization's standing committees, and it really serves to connect both our conservation practitioners, but also our educators that are a part of our network, and to think of ways to develop skill building opportunities, to network across those two groups, and to really think of ways to elevate conservation education across different fields. We have historically worked with educators in higher education institutions, but over the last few years have branched out to include K-12 educators, informal educators, out-of-school time educators, and we want to continue doing that in the future. So this workshop, like all of our workshops moving forward, will really be catered to any educator who wants to learn more about conservation education. Our committee chair, who was not able to be here today, is Dr. Martha Groom. Dr. Groom has worked diligently to prepare all of these workshops and is also a huge advocate of conservation education. So if you have any questions about today's workshop or are interested in joining the committee and being part of our conversations and planning efforts for future workshops, I encourage you to reach out to Dr. Groom, or really to any of the other members of our committee, whose contact information can be found on our website as well. And then the last thing I wanted to mention before we dive into today's workshop is that we have another workshop coming up later this winter, end of winter, early spring, which will be related to today's workshop. So I will let our presenter Ann Lewis explain a bit more about this. But I just wanted to put it on everyone's calendar so you can sign up and attend that one as well. Okay, so now to today's workshop. As I mentioned before, our speaker today is Ann Lewis. She is the Interim Executive Director and also Special Projects Director at the South Dakota Discovery Center. She is the mind behind MacroBlitz, the MacroBlitz project. And I'm so excited that she's here with us today and willing to lead this amazing workshop with everyone. So I will pass it on to Ann. Ann, thank you for being here and take it away.
Thank you, Bernardo. I realized I did not have my mute button off. How long have we all been on Zoom? Uh, yes, so my name is Ann Lewis, and let me go ahead and share my screen. Let me move some windows around first. Change my mind at the last minute. And so while I'm getting this all set up, if you want to start getting ready in the chat, just to tell me a little bit about you. We're a small group today, so we can keep it pretty conversational. Just where you're from and what is your teaching context? Are you faculty at a higher ed? Are you K-12? Very curious about that. So, okay. Let me go ahead and just open some other, well, not that critical. All right, so while you are getting that ready in the chat, I will go ahead and get started. So just a quick overview of what's going to happen today. We're going to do an introduction to MacroBlitz, and I'll do an overview of the iNat MacroBlitz project. And we'll touch, we're going to go, I'm showing you in point 3 here, the MacroBlitz steps. We're actually not going to do 3A through D. That will be more of the next seminar's experience. So, but today we're actually going to talk about tips and tricks to photograph so you can practice, even if you can't get out to a water body. And we're actually going to be uploading. So there'll be some hands-on interactivity towards the end. And Rita, I'm seeing your chat, and that's awesome. I am on the executive committee. We call them volunteer naturalists in South Dakota, where I'm from, and love that you're curious about this and want to be part of it. So a little bit about me. In addition to being the interim executive director, which I stepped into kind of unexpectedly, my main job is to be the Watershed Education and Outreach Project Director for South Dakota. And I don't know if it means anything to you, but it's funded out of 319 EPA dollars. I'm also an adjunct at Ogallala Lakota College on the Pine Ridge Reservation. I teach remotely. I'm actually in Pierre. The college is about 3 hours away. It's both on the Pine Ridge and the Cheyenne River Reservation. I have my master's from Hamline University in St. Paul, and I am the team lead on the NatGeo project, on the MacroBlitz NatGeo project. This is a National Geographic funded project. And more about me, if you go to macroblitz.org, my bio is there. And that was taken last spring. I think it was like my first time back in the water last year. So I like to start out with this. This is sort of classic Nat Geo. I'm going to stop share and reshare because I want to make sure that I shared, optimizing for video and sound. So this is sort of your classic Nat Geo, what they call sizzle video. So, and it's just a very quick, inspirational introduction to MacroBlitz.
Freshwater macroinvertebrates are these incredible tiny creatures that play a big role in the functioning of ecosystems. They're the base of many food chains and really good indicators of the general health of freshwater systems. My name is Dalal Hanna. I'm a Canadian National Geographic explorer and freshwater conservation scientist. My research brings me into freshwater systems to collect all kinds of data. But some of my most favorite data to collect is macroinvertebrate data. Because macroinvertebrates are really cool, and they're excellent indicators of overall freshwater health. Macroinvertebrates are this awesome, sort of secret treasure hiding in streams and rivers that I'd love for more people to get the chance to connect with. These tiny insects make their homes on the rocks, leaves, and branches at the bottom of streams and rivers. They nest into the sand and thrive in freshwaters throughout the world. There are so many different kinds of them, each with their special features and skills. And when you stop and take the time to get a closer look, beautiful, you realize just how wonderful they are. But unfortunately, the abundance of macroinvertebrates is declining. And although we know that this is a problem that we need to try to solve, scientists can barely keep track of what's going on. So to me, MacroBlitz is a way to address that. It's a way for everyone to get involved, to help document what is happening to macroinvertebrates around the world so we can find ways to protect them well into the future.
A beautiful gills! Look at its gills! It's awesome!
I've always loved freshwaters, but as a parent, my understanding of just how important they are has deepened. We need to protect them and all the beautiful creatures that inhabit them, including the small but mighty macroinvertebrates. So come on, join us. Find your local stream, soak in its beauty, flip a rock, take a picture, and MacroBlitz. This collective effort has so much to teach us all.
Pretty inspirational. Doesn't it just make you want to get out in the water and start scooping up to see what you can see? I've seen that video, I don't know how many times, and I'm still just deeply moved whenever I see it. A little about our mission. Our mission is to inspire and empower people to find and photograph aquatic macroinvertebrates and upload their photos to iNaturalist, for science and for learning. Let me unpack that a little bit. I don't want to make assumptions about who is here, but so if this seems very remedial, just bear with us and we'll get to the juicier stuff in a moment. So a little bit about aquatic macroinvertebrates. First of all, they're organisms without a backbone. That's the invertebrate part that live some or all of their life in water. That's the aquatic. And macro refers to their size, which is between micro and mega, usually smaller than 5 inches. Generally, macros are defined as can be seen with the naked eye. You don't need a microscope to see them, although some kind of magnification is helpful. We'll talk about that in a bit. This iNaturalist part, I'm not going to assume that everyone watching this is familiar with iNaturalist, but it's been out there long enough that I don't want to do a super deep dive at this moment. We'll talk more about some of the iNaturalist specifics in a bit. But it is an online platform where you can upload time and place stamp photos or sound recordings of wild and natural organisms. And I'm speaking very generally outside the bounds of MacroBlitz, because obviously you're not going to get a lot of captive and cultivated macroinvertebrates. I mean, maybe, but for our purposes, we don't find them usually just outside like you can with plants. You can find a lot of plants that are captive and cultivated. And that's one of the ongoing discussions on iNaturalist. So now that you have a little bit of an idea of what MacroBlitz is, let's talk a little bit about the why. And there are two main whys: science and learning. So with the science, when you upload these observations of aquatic macroinvertebrates to iNaturalist, it documents their presence, which is useful for screening, meaning right there now, like what's there right now, as well as historical data sets. So you have your screening data set, your contemporaries data set, and your historical data set. What was in there in the past? So we're looking at this to establish a historical, even perhaps longitudinal data set. And if you're not familiar with iNaturalist, each one of these orange square is a damselfly observation. Those of you who are perhaps a little bit more in the technical side of water quality monitoring or research, you know the importance of your study design question. What exactly are you trying to research or understand with this project? And ours actually happens to be very simple. Our question is simply, what kinds of macroinvertebrates do you find when you churn and turn rocks in a stream or jab the vegetation and top layer of sediment with a net in a pond, wetland, or along a lakeshore? And this is a little bit different than a lot of aquatic macroinvertebrate monitoring programs, which have a more rigorous protocol where you're expected to get a certain number of species or specimens, or you have a defined geographic representative section of the stream or lake that you're working in. We're setting those aside for accessibility. And simply our question is, go stick a net in the water, turn over some rocks, swish the net around. What do you see? Upload that. Our practices, and again, this is a little different from a lot of aquatic macroinvertebrate projects, especially if you're into research or using them for water quality assessments. We're not doing a permanent collection. We don't have a minimum sample size. We want to minimize site disturbance and footprint. So, those of you who do the more rigorous level, the 100-meter stretch with the 11 transects every 10 meters, we're not going to worry so much about that. You pick a few safe, legally accessible places to access, and that's where you go. We're interested in minimizing stress to the organisms. And I'll be honest, this comes very much out of my work with indigenous people. You don't consume unless you need to. So we're trying to be kind to our macroinvertebrate relatives. And then return your organisms when done, if allowed. Now, not every site will allow you to do that, especially if you're on some sort of federal land, U.S. federal land, because of U.S. Army Corps of Engineer practices, where you need a permit to return something. Sometimes you need a permit to take things out. Sometimes you need a permit to put something in. And that is part of your get ready, which we'll talk about more in the next section in March. Okay, so that was your very high level overview of the science that we're trying to achieve. I will say parenthetically, there are a lot of other cool science things that are happening, and just to sort of maybe pat myself on the back a little bit. I was doing some macroinvertebrate monitoring this past summer, and I scooped a chironomid, and I didn't even know what it was at first. I'm not a taxonomist by any stretch of the means. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And so I got it down to taxonomy, and then the entomologist for the MacroBlitz project, Isai Mavris, he looked at it and he goes, you might have a new species there. He said that looks pretty different. And he worked with a postdoc. And at some point, I need to get back to that spot and search the chironomids and send it off to the postdoc who will do the genomic sequencing. But yeah, I mean, here in Pierce, South Dakota, in this little state park I go to, new species hiding in plain sight. So that could be your experience. This aquatic macroinvertebrates are very understudied. But let's talk about the learning. Rita mentioned she's a master naturalist. So you have this whole community of people, educators, these natural resource volunteers, a lot of people who are really interested in this stuff. They don't have a professional or an academic connection to it. They just love looking at bugs and taking pictures, which is very cool and kind of like what I am. So macroinvertebrates, studying them is popular in schools, camps, nature and environmental outreach programs. And so our intent with MacroBlitz is to provide educators and other change makers resources to learn and teach about aquatic macroinvertebrates. And this is the important part, building knowledge, affinity, and concern in themselves and their learners. Most people have no clue there's this whole hidden world in the water, and that the dragonflies, the damselflies they see flying about on a summer evening, they don't know where they come from. And then when you scoop something out of the water and there they are crawling around, it's like, whoa. If you ever get a chance to go out, especially like with freshman high school students, a middle school, before they're too cool, or before, they're still trying to be very cool, I should say. And then they see something and it's just, they still don't have their filters quite set in place. It's a lot of fun to see someone see their first caddisfly. And then the hope is that with these resources, including the iNaturalist platform and project, you get lots of opportunities to look at macroinvertebrates. Because for those of us who aren't professionals, who don't have academic degrees in this, you get good at this by doing it. That's the secret right there. And so the more you can look at aquatic macroinvertebrates, the more knowledgeable you will be. And we provided you a great resource to just look at lots and lots and lots and lots of aquatic macroinvertebrates, most of them identified reasonably accurately. So our vision, we had our mission, we have our vision, more data for screening and historical data sets, that's the science, and more people who know and care about aquatic macroinvertebrates. That's the learning. So I'm going to take a moment now and we'll walk through what the MacroBlitz project looks like on iNaturalist. And I'm going to put a link in the chat and I'm going to give you a few moments to click around on this and just wherever you go. I've learned it's absolutely futile to direct people, but we're going to have sort of a share out of what you saw and experienced. So in about 3 minutes. So at 29 after the hour, in my time, I'm at 2:29. I don't know what time you are. Go ahead and just click around and then we'll come back and share. Welcome, Elizabeth. What we are doing now is we are looking at the MacroBlitz project on iNaturalist. So I just dropped the link in the chat. We're just clicking around to see what it looks like, what it's all about. And in about 2 minutes, we're going to come back together and share what we saw or what kind of made an impression on us. And for those of you who are watching via recording, let me go ahead and share my screen and show you where you can grab that URL. It's right here, iNaturalist.org/projects/MacroBlitz. At this point, you don't need an account to just click around, but to actually upload, you will. And we'll talk about that next time too. Okay, let's come back together. Would anybody like to, you can, I don't know if everybody can share their screen. I don't know if we have that turned on, but would anybody like to either put something in the chat or just unmute and share one of your discoveries of while you were looking at MacroBlitz? What do you notice about MacroBlitz, the project? What did you find out that was very cool? Bernardo, did you happen to look at anything?
I did, actually. I was just looking at the number of observations and the expanse of observations that are currently available. I knew this was a large scale program, at least in North America, but it's great to see that it extends pretty much across the Americas. Um, so it's a lot of data, and just from a community science perspective, that is really cool to see.
Yeah, we set this up. The geographic span is North and South America. We've had a couple of people have said, "Hey, could we get this in Asia? Could we get this in Africa? Can we get it in Europe?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, find a taxonomist," because it's setting up the project with the taxonomic requirements turned out to be a lot more challenging than I realized when I naively decided I was going to do this. Oh, I'll just go and set some things up. It did not turn out to be quite that easy. So yeah, it's been a process. So Rita said there's a lot of variety. I was surprised at how many things there are that I see on my moth sheets some nights. Rita, that blew my mind that there were aquatic larval butterflies and moths. That absolutely blew my mind. I had no idea. And I found one and I was like, what? I thought they were so rare because in all my years of educational kind of level of monitoring, going out with students and whatnot, to collect aquatic macroinvertebrates, they never told me that there were butterflies and moths, Lepidoptera. Oh, diving beetles. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And though when you pull a diving beetle out of the water, that is just the coolest thing. They are the coolest looking organism. So any other, and the toe biters, yeah, the big ones with the pinchers, yeah. Um, anyone else want to unmute or pop something in the chat about their experience with MacroBlitz project? The number of observations caught by predators was cool. Oh, tell me more about that. I don't know that I've ever noticed that, Elizabeth. Do you want to just unmute real quick and unpack that a little bit? What you saw? I don't know if you're in a place where you can unmute. Okay, so she shared one. I'll go ahead and share my screen again so that folks at home can see this as well. Let's see. Screen, what screen do I want? Yep. Okay, and then I will go ahead and this is the one that Elizabeth. Oh, yes. Oh, the duck eating the snail. Yeah, that's a great observation. I tried to, there we go. Yeah, that's a twofer. Um, and that's a great point that, these macroinvertebrates are in plain sight everywhere. And just as a side note about macroinvertebrates, the insects are sort of the rock stars of the macroinvertebrate world. Everybody is, all about the insects, the Coleoptera, the mayflies, the Ephemeroptera, et cetera, et cetera. But the snails and the mollusks and the leeches, uh, the they're macroinvertebrates too. You can see them. They're big enough to be seen. They don't have a backbone, and they live in water. So, yeah, yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Go ahead. All right. Okay. Yeah. So Rita said, didn't know that so many mollusks were included. So I'm just going to take you on a quick tour of the MacroBlitz project on iNaturalist. As you can see, there are multiple sub-projects. These are called, in iNat parlance, collection projects. And we had to set them up the way they did, this, particularly with this non-arthropod that's kind of an unwieldy category. But I didn't know how else to describe it. But let's start actually with something that's probably familiar with everybody. We'll look at the nymphs. And when you look at an iNat observation of a MacroBlitz iNat observation is in the nymphs, we'll go with there are currently 8,274 of them. And this one was observed by larval fish guy, and he identified it as the maculated small square-gilled mayfly. It was observed in Florida. I don't know how they're doing down in Florida, how the maculated small square-gilled mayflies are doing today. They're probably pretty chilly. And then you'll notice over here, and this is pretty critical for understanding iNaturalist and MacroBlitz, is they have the annotations. And you can see that larval fish guy looks like he annotated the life stage nymph. And when we go back and look at our project and we scroll down a little bit, we can see here the project requirements. The project requirements on iNaturalist are those characteristics that must be present in your observation in order to be included in the project. So we have listed our taxa for the nymphs. And then had our location. Interestingly enough, in iNaturalist world, Hawaii is not part of the North American continent, which kind of makes sense. So I guess they're looking at it more geologically than geographically. I don't know. Anybody can contribute from any other project. Research grade and needs ID, we won't talk about that. There's another level called casual, where something's usually casual because it's either captive or cultivated, which we're not too worried about, or it's missing some pretty significant metadata. And this up here is your metadata. And sorry for the scroll roll, the time, date, location, all of that's metadata. You will notice that we start on April 7th. April 7th, 2024 is when MacroBlitz launched. At some point, we will turn this off, this start date off, and just pull in all observations that meet the project requirements. And then everything in this project needs to be annotated NIMF. And the reason for that is, let's say we have the dragonflies and damselflies. Those are one of my favorites. Let's go back up here to observations. Here we go, darners. And if they weren't annotated NIMF, like it was here, so we would have all damselflies and dragonflies at every life stage swept into this project, because this project is like a saved search. It goes out whenever you open it up. The iNaturalist squirrel searching bot thingies go out and they sweep up everything that meets the project requirements and then populates your project with the observations. If we don't have that NIMF requirement, it'll pull in all of these at every life stage. And dragonflies and damselflies are not aquatic in their adult stage. MacroBlitz is simply to look at anything that's aquatic at any stage of its life. So some organisms are aquatic throughout. Most insects in particular are aquatic only in the juvenile stages. So that was a lot. Are there any questions about that? Okay, let me go back to my, I touched on some of this, and this is the overview of the MacroBlitz project on iNat. I like to begin with the end in mind, so that as you're thinking about taking the photos and collecting, you know where you're going with them. So when you upload something, you want to make sure you have all of this, the date, the location, an initial ID. We'll talk about ID more next time. And then, of course, the annotation. These are the preliminary steps for getting ready for doing MacroBlitz. Get ready, gear up, find, collect, and identify. We will talk about those more next time. I just want to assure you that MacroBlitz is very similar to other educational community science level aquatic macroinvertebrate monitoring programs, in that we go down to suborder, dragonfly, damselflies, those are both suborders of the Odonatas. But we aren't really looking at species or tribe or families even. Those are hard to identify from a photo. So, but we can get a lot of good information even at this level of taxonomic information. All right, let me just stop my share real quick. I've been talking for about half an hour. Just want to make sure that there are no questions. You have your reaction buttons at the bottom. If you're on an iPad, I'm assuming this is still the case, your reaction buttons are at the top. Can anybody ground shoot that for me? Is that still the thick place? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. All right, not seeing any questions. Let's go continue on our way and talk about phone macrophotography. Because again, I don't know that I've actually said this, we want to make MacroBlitz as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. You saw that wide geographic area, and there are all kinds of access issues throughout this region. Like my students on the Pine Ridge reservations, they have phones, but they may not have really good internet. A DSLR camera with stacking software. Poverty is high and I don't want to, kind of say this is their kind of be negative about that, because you can really put a lot on people who are, dealing with some pretty tough stuff. But a lot of my students won't have access to fancier cameras. So I want to make this as accessible to as many people as possible in as many locations as possible. For some people, internet access is an issue, in some of the rural, remote places. We had a team member, um, Carlos Velasquez. He did a MacroBlitz experience at the Ejidos, which are the landowners around the monarch butterfly preserve in Mexico. And internet is really spotty there. It's very remote, very rural, very not a lot of infrastructure for internet. So that's why we're like, you can just use your phone. That's fine. Just go through these, understand the purpose of phone macrophotography. I've touched on some of that. Recommended equipment for basic macrophotography with a phone camera. Understand good phone macrophotography practices, and then we can touch on advanced macrophotography skills at the end. So the purpose, again, we want to, I guess this is a little different than the purposes, is we are interested in identification. In our photo, we want to have the organism be as identifiable as possible. And so you have something when you're generally looking at animals, and this is particularly true in the birding world, but I found it also to be true in the macroinvertebrate world, is something called GIS, general impression of size and shape. So you want to make sure that you have a clear, at least a very clear outline of the shape of the organism. And then you want to know that, have pictures of the gills, tails, antenna, wing pads, legs, and of course, these are all mainly insect focused. But the better your photo, the more likely it is that will be identifiable to a taxonomic level that will get it into the MacroBlitz project. Macrophotography is close up, and it's where the small thing is larger in the photo than it is in real life. So this mayfly is about 1.3 centimeters or half an inch long. And so I know that because, and we'll talk more about this in the equipment section, is this is a Rate in the Rain index card, and the squares are a quarter of an inch or 6.35 millimeters. So it's about 6.35. Yeah, that's right. So about your phone, and already this information is somewhat dated. Some phones, not all, have a macro, usually indicated by a flower icon. Sometimes you can intentionally turn it on. Sometimes it will automatically engage as you get close enough. Your later model iPhones do not have a macro mode. Some of your Android models do not. This is where it makes having your phone be your camera a little tricky, because there's no universal advice. But I would say if you find a macro mode on your phone, use it. This is the difference between macro mode and not macro. Same, I don't think it's the exact same organism, but I had gone out and I had started taking photos with my clip-on magnifier lens. And then I realized I had to engage the macro mode, and you can see over here what it looks like. You do lose some what's that word? Some sort of pixels. It's not quite as, it's a little more pixelated, especially as you blow it up. But you do get some more details. Resolution. Thank you. Words. So we talked earlier about a device to magnify the macroinvertebrates. I said, macroinvertebrates you don't need a microscope. Although I do know some programs that they do have microscopes and they have the ocular attachments for the cell phone, so you can just click your cell phone on there and take a picture of the macroinvertebrate. This is actually me over here. This is my setup. And this is a clip-on lens. It's a Zenvo, I believe. iPhones, later model iPhones are very tricky to place these clip-ons. There's a little bit of a figuring out. My advice is that you take your phone. Let me see if how I don't know if this is showing up, and you turn it in picture mode, and then one by one, you put your finger, you hold it up close to something, and as it's up close to something, one by one, you put your thumb over the different lenses on the back, and once you see your finger, that is your macro lens. Now, with a later model iPhone that I've seen, and this could have already changed, is it'll automatically switch. So you have to be quick to figure out which is the preferred macro mode lens on your iPhone. And I have found that for whatever reason, these rubber band easy macro lenses work better on iPhones than they do on Androids. So I cannot explain that. These happen to be cheaper than these. Some good phone macro photography practices: be aware of light and shadows, isolate the organism, get as close as focus allows, take multiple photographs, and then use object for scale. Go through these quickly. You would tend to think that your bright sunny day is the best day for taking photos. And if you're a photographer, you know, like, no, the sunny days, bright sunny days are really not good because you get these harsh light and these shadows. So to help us with that, what we do for macroinvertebrates photography is we intentionally create some shade or shadow and take the photo there. And this evens out the light. It underexposes it a little bit, but it allows you to get up closer with your phone and not have the phone create a shadow. Because if you're in bright light and bring the phone close, it casts a shadow that immediately does something to the lenses and your photos will not come out good. And then you can fix it in photo editing tools. And I rely on those. I just use Google Photos for mine, and you can lighten it and, you know, turn it around. Of course, you can always choose just to go out during golden hour, magic hour, 2 hours after sunset, or 2 hours after sunrise or before sunset. Those are also when the mosquitoes tend to be out, so you can decide, but you get this gorgeous diffuse golden light. You'll want to isolate. That isn't always easy. This is not, it sounds easy, but you know, there's a little, you have to practice it. We just use a Petri dish. A lot of programs use clear cups or ice cube trays. It's really, again, this is the role of the equipment is more important than the actual piece of equipment. We're looking at something that will isolate your organism and allow you to get close enough to take a photo. You'll want to get as close as your focus allows, and that's a little bit of the back and forth and going into focus, going out of focus. Eventually, you'll get a sense of how close to bring your phone. And of course, it always depends on the organism as well, the size of the organism. Bigger organisms, you can't get in focus at the same time, and that's solved by stacking software. If the organisms are moving, so that's always challenging. So there is a lot of practice involved. I have lots of not great photos. You'll want to take multiple photos and try to get the gills, tails, and feet. And if you have burst mode, and on mine, it's just you hold down the picture button and drag it down, that'll take a bunch of rapid fire pictures. The object in the background for scale, we talked a little bit about that. The Right in the Rain index card is my go-to. You could use really anything. A Right in the Rain, by the way, is a water-resistant paper. and you use it a lot in field work. Advanced macrophotography options. The Olympus TG is a point and shoot that a lot of iNaturalists use. So you could just get a specialized camera for that. You could get a DSLR with a lens. You can use stacking software. And what stacking software does is it will take a lot of different photos of an organism with each different section in focus, and then it will layer the photos together, and so that each part of the organism is in focus. And then to get around that light problem that we talked about at the beginning, you have light and flash diffusers where you can sort of create that naturally diffused light. All right, let's talk about uploading. I like to use the web uploader for iNaturalist. I feel it is the best way to annotate. The apps are good for taking photos and then uploading. Some of the kind of metadata that we're looking for is really challenging to do in the app. So yeah, just be aware that if you take a group out and they're all using their phones to upload, which is totally fine, that you can then go back afterwards and annotate and do the things to make the observations meet the requirements of the project. So with that, I'm going to put into the chat a link of a lot of random aquatic macroinvertebrates that I have photographed. And if you have an iNaturalist project, you can go ahead and just pick one that you like and upload it. And I will pick one and I will talk you through it. So if for whatever reason you don't have an iNaturalist account, did I say if you have an iNaturalist project? I meant to say if you have an iNaturalist account. If you don't have an iNaturalist account, you can just watch me do mine. And I'll talk you through it. But it would be a lot more enjoyable, I think, if you were to actually play with this yourself. So any questions before we go into this last part where we're playing with the uploads and the pictures? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Feel free to go play, and we'll probably come back together in about 15 minutes, and if you uploaded something, I'll take a look. But otherwise, you can just follow along with me. Go back to sharing my screen. Okay. So let's pick a cool organism. I like this guy. There's a lot of cool ones here. So when I'm looking at it, I'm just going to check the info on this. Huh. Apparently, I did not mark the location on this. That could be an issue. And it's actually a learning opportunity. Where was I on October 2nd, 2023 at 4:36 p.m.? October 2nd, 2023. Okay, well, I have a pretty good idea of where that usually is. Obviously, if you have, when you take the picture, you will know where you have been. And if you end up not knowing where your organism is, then we will look at what do you do when you upload it. So I am going to go download my organism. I'm just going to put it in my download files. Then I'm going to go over to my iNaturalist account and click on upload. Oops. Yep, upload. And choose files. And this is already downloaded. If you want to get if you're taking photos with your phone, as we talked about, and you want to get them onto your laptop or your computer, you'll have to figure out a way to transfer them. Usually Google is a good way. You just upload them to Google in the cloud, and then you access your Google albums and photos from your computer. I think there's something similar for iNaturalist. You can email them to yourselves if you want to kick it old school. So, all right. So this is the interface for the web uploader. And you can see that the species name is not automatically populated. But before I go to species name, I like to make sure that the date, time, and location are populated. Because what happens is I get so excited about what is it, that I forget to fill this stuff out. And if this stuff isn't filled out, this is what is one of the ways your observations can be called casual, because this is the metadata that's really essential. And if you remember, our MacroBlitz projects on iNaturalist don't accept casual observations. So I'm going to say, yep, this looks good. Now the location is missing. So you click on it and you can scroll in, and it was somewhere in South Dakota. And I have pinned locations. So I'm like, where would that have been? I have a pretty good idea that it was up here on this. Is that where it would have been? Nope, up here. There's a little fishing pond, and I like to go there. So I'm going to just say that it was there. I'm going to delete this one later, obviously. So I put my pin there, and the latitude and longitude automatically populate. This right here is accuracy. And so there's a 61 meter radius. And, you can get super, super pinpoint if you want. Generally, something about this size to indicate the water body is sufficient. Geoprivacy, open. And that means when you upload it to iNaturalist, everybody will be able to see it. You can also obscure it so that everybody will be able to see that there was an observation in this general region. I think in the US, it's normally at county level that they'll put it somewhere in the county. And then they have private. And honestly, I don't know that much about private. I think the only people who can see private observations are the uploaders. And so you're curating or collecting a database, perhaps of culturally or scientifically vulnerable organisms, and you don't want everybody else to know where those are, but you're going to use them in your research. So the locality notes are helpful if you're going to pin something. If this is a site you're going to be uploading from a lot. So I might say Mickelson Fishing Pond rather than Pierce, South Dakota. And once I pin it, it ends up in this dropdown. All right, that looks good. So I'm going to update it. And you can see that it is automatically populated there. Notes are good to add if you have something you want to share about it. You don't want to click captive and cultivated. We'll come back to tags in a moment. So species name. Now, if you're not familiar with iNaturalist, you know that they have this thing called CB, computer vision. And it will recommend an identification for you. I pretty much will consult it, but I don't rely on it because I identify to the level of my expertise. So here I'm seeing like genus, here like the speckled dun, that's down to species. And I am not enough of an expert to know that this is any of these things. What I do know is that this is a mayfly, or I won't say I know it. I am pretty sure it's a mayfly. That's how I would identify it. So I'm going to put mayflies, ephemeroptera, as the name. And then I will submit this observation. Oh, oops. Observation. Oh, I'll just since I've got this brought up. So the reason I called it a mayfly is, of course, it's the insect, and it has the 3 tails and it has the abdominal gills. And those are usually characters of mayflies. Mayflies and stoneflies can be really similar, but I happen to know that where I live, there are no stoneflies because they require cold, highly oxygenated water. And I live on the prairie where the water tends to be warm and lower oxygen. So you do see mayflies though. Okay. I want to talk about tags for a minute. So if I'm not sure of the mayfly identification, I will add MacroBlitz as a tag. And only you can tag your observation. So if you're working with students or other naturalists or whatever, you can't go in and edit someone else's tags. Only they can do that. And what this does is it keeps this observation in the MacroBlitz context. Because even if it doesn't end up in the project, I know to go to search for the MacroBlitz tag, and I'm looking at them to make sure they have observations or have identifications that will get them into the MacroBlitz project, if I can do that. I might tag people with more experience in identifying than me, but it's just a way to say, hey, here's an observation that needs to be in the MacroBlitz project. Please look at it. All right. I'm going to go ahead and submit this. Saving observation. Oh my, what's going on with iNaturalist? I'm seeing the swirling. There we go. All right. So now it's in my list of observations, and you can see I'm sort of a generalist. I have a tree sparrow, I have a European mantis, but let's go back and look at this one. So I have all my things. What I don't have is an annotation, because you can't annotate when you upload on the web upload. You have to go back and look at it. So this is a nymph, and it will suggest annotations based on the taxonomy. So if, for example, you have a one of those cool aquatic moth Lepidoptera things, it'll say larva instead of nymph. Because again, just the 50-cent explanation. Larva pupates, they go into their little cases and they come out, all beautiful. Nymphs just keep shedding and growing until one day they crawl up out of the water, crawl out of their skin, and they're a damselfly or a dragonfly. Okay. You can see here we have the MacroBlitz tag. And I'm going to show you another a thing here. So you can see the projects. I have all these badges here of different projects where this observation is now showing up. The MacroBlitz badge is not one of them because this was observed in October of 2023. And when you remember when we looked at the iNaturalist project, I said the observations were only that were going to be in there were observations made after April 7th, 2024. So I'm going to go back to my observations and find a aquatic macroinvertebrate observation made after April 7th. And we happen to have one right here, a microcatoslides, which I think they're just so cute. They're so tiny. And I have these MacroBlitz badges on the observation page. And the way you get those is, let's see, let me just go ahead and click on that, is to become a member to join the project. Once you join the project, if you make an observation that meets that project's requirements, remember the project requirements right here. Oh, that's because this is the umbrella project. You will get the project icon on that observation page. And I just realized that the project requirements for the overarching MacroBlitz is that it's in one of the collection projects. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing. And if somebody wants to talk about their experience uploading an organism, anybody have anything they want to share? Bernardo, you know I'm going to put you on the spot. Did you
Yeah,
upload?
of course. I didn't have anything specific to upload this time, but I have uploaded to iNaturalist many times in the past. And I think the process has become a bit more streamlined over the last few years. Although this was the overview that you gave us for a specific project within iNaturalist was really useful because most of the time I just upload for general, community science purposes.
Mhm.
But there are some extra steps that I didn't know about when it relates to a specific project.
Yeah. Regardless of whether or not you are uploading something from MacroBlitz, go ahead and annotate. Carrie Seltzer, I think today, and I think my time is, this presentation is actually running opposite against hers. She's what's her title? She's one of the directors of iNaturalist. She's talking about how to make your observations phenologically useful with annotations, amongst other things. So, when you're uploading pictures of plants in particular, make sure they have that fruiting, flowering, leafing annotation there. Oh, okay. Rita said, yeah, you're getting all the iNat stuff today, aren't you, Rita? So I actually did not catch it. Was there anything else to add to that? What else did you take away from Carrie's presentation? She's amazing. She's a friend of mine, and I have mad respect for her. She's actually a large part of the reason I'm so active in iNaturalist, because she's amazing. Okay, yeah. Go in and do it. That is great advice. Just do this. Regardless of what the project is. I mean, with MacroBlitz, you're just going to have to go in and literally get your feet wet if you're wearing boots. Otherwise, get your knees wet as you kneel down and scoop the nets or whatever, and just do it and take the pictures. The more you do it, the better you'll get. I promise you. I promise you. So, and then you can take somebody with you. So yeah. And Rita said, Carrie recommended focusing on a genus or area. So limit your observations. Yeah, that's never going to be me. I'm sort of an indiscriminate iNatter. I'm one of these people who are really hard to hike with because I'm like, oh wait, I got to get a picture. So anyway. So with that, I think we can call it good. Um, I guess we can have our final chance for questions, ideas. Those of you who are watching via recording, feel free to reach out to me. Probably the best way to get a hold of me is admin@macroblitz.org. That comes to me still, and it won't get lost in my work email. So, and I can put well, I don't know, recordings they see the chat, right? I think so.
Technically, we can upload the chat if needed.
Okay.
But otherwise, I am also happy to share any links that you may have and with our participants, and also post them on our website.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that way, if you reach out to me through admin@macroblitz.org, I know it's a MacroBlitz related question. I tend to answer those first because I like them, as opposed to a query about an invoice or something else that I find myself dealing with these days in administration. So yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm here to support you. It's going to be awesome.
And I guess just as a reminder to everyone here, and we'll also promote this online, but there is that next workshop that I mentioned at the beginning of today's presentation that will focus on operationalizing MacroBlitz. So if you want to learn more about how to use it for your class or a specific project, then that is the workshop for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then just before everyone leaves, I did also want to share this quick QR code. This is really just a post-event survey. So if you want to take a second to just take a picture of this so that you can let us know about today's experience and about any other topics you might want to hear in the future, that would be really, really useful for the education committee, but also for our organization as a whole.
Yes, if you have anything that I can operationalize, any feedback you think would be good for me, please feel free to pass it along through this survey. I'm always looking how to make this better.
And then, Anne, I just wanted to thank you again for being here today, for leading this workshop, and also for leading our next workshop in March.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Bernardo.